Namaskar and Juliet. Today on Voice of Kinnaur 88.4 FM, we welcome Dr. Uttam Lal, a distinguished Himalayan geographer with a strong academic connection to Kinnaur. A PhD scholar from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Dr. Lal has studied Kinnaur's geography, its ancient Indo-Tibetan trade routes, pastoral communities, and the cultural exchanges that shaped our borderlands. Honored with major CSIR fellowships, international visiting positions, and the Geography Teacher Award, he has given valuable contributions to understanding glacier, climate, borderlands, and mountains across the Himalayas. Today, with his knowledge and experience, we aim to explore Kinnaur's unique geography, its historical trade linkages with Tibet. Welcome to the Voice of Kinnaur, sir.
My pleasure.
Sir, first of all, could you please tell us about the geographical diversity of Kinnaur?
Kinnaur, being in the Himalayan region, a lot of people think that it's like any other part of the Himalaya, but Kinnaur is quite unique in its geographical setup. In the sense, first is I am not aware that if there's any other district in the Himalaya which has been perceived or which can be perceived as a microcosm of the Himalaya, in the sense it has all the divisions of the Himalaya.
Yes, sir.
So you have the cold arid dimension of the Himalaya, you have the lower valley which is dense and quite humid, and then you have the middle Himalaya. So Kinnaur is one single district which represents the entire Himalaya in its microcosm. So one can understand Kinnaur as the index of the Himalaya. Having said that, physiographically we can divide Kinnaur on the basis of the altitude.
Yes, sir.
So between say up to an altitude of about 2,500 meters, that can be considered as the lower Kinnaur.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And that is represented in terms of Nichar and Kalpa, part of the Kalpa subdivision, and Sangla,
Okay, sir.
and which is basically seen in terms of dense temperate forest areas. Then between 2,500 meters to 3,500 meters is the middle Kinnaur, where 𝗵𝗏𝗃𝗃, Kalpa, Ridge, these and parts of the 𝗃 subdivision also come. Not the 𝗃 itself, but the 𝗃 subdivision part of that comes in middle Kinnaur, where one can see in terms of the mixed conifer forests are there. And finally, what we have is the upper Kinnaur, anything which is above 3,500 meters to up to about 6,000 meters, which is the altitude. The highest point, of course, is 𝗊𝗶𝗃𝗃, 6,816 meters.
Yes, sir.
So that's the highest point in Kinnaur. Well, the physiographic division also one can see in terms of the mountain ranges that we have in Kinnaur.
Yes, sir.
So lower down we have 𝗏𝗏𝗏, then we have Great Himalayan Range, where you have 𝗃𝗹𝗃𝗃 Peak and 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 Peak. And I want to bring notice to whosoever is listening to the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 Peak, because sometime I have seen in these days in Google everything is there, and sometime I see it's written that it's the highest peak in Kinnaur, which is factually incorrect. This is 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 is the highest peak of the Great Himalayan Range, not the highest peak of Kinnaur.
Okay, sir.
Right? And then finally, the third mountain range that we have in Kinnaur is the 𝗧𝗪𝗃 Range.
Yes, sir.
So the highest peak of Kinnaur, or for that matter Himachal, is located in Kinnaur. It's 𝗧𝗪𝗃 Range, which is 𝗊𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃.
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is the very distinct division if one thinks about the physiographic or the geographic division of the Himalaya. And of course, we have three distinct rivers in Kinnaur:
Yes, sir.
the 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃, 𝗏𝗏, and 𝗃𝗏𝗃. So to say, climate-wise, and the ecological zone-wise, Kinnaur can be categorized into 5 ecological zones. The first is the zone which is up to about 2,000 meters.
Yes.
The lowest altitude in Kinnaur is, of course, around 1,300 meters. So between 1,300 meters to up to about 2,000 meters, the ecological zone that we have is subtropical and temperate forest ecological zone. The second zone that we can see in Kinnaur is between 2,000 to 3,000 meters, which is moist temperate forest area.
Yes, sir.
And the third is ecological zone is the subalpine zone, which is between 3,000 to 3,500 meters.
Yes, sir.
Where you get juniper, birch, and alpine herbs. And above that altitude, the fourth ecological zone is the alpine grassland, which is beyond 3,500 meters. And finally, what we have is the cold desert vegetation, which is around 4,800 meters and above.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So this is ecological zonation of the Kinnaur. So geographically, we can see or try to understand Kinnaur that way. Of course, there are other variations one can see if one starts looking at Kinnaur from the perspective of geology or natural hazard. But I will not get into that.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, moving forward, Kinnaur has long history of culture and commercial ties with Tibet. Can you please tell us about the ancient trade relation between India and Tibet?
Well, that's a very particular question to look at our neighbors.
Yes, sir.
And looking at the Tibet and the connection that we had through the border district and Kinnaur and other border areas, and to be in general thinking about India and Tibet, we can categorize that in terms of the different zones of the Himalaya, different locations of the Himalaya. So and these connections that we had with Tibet through the trade was one can see from the perspective of cross ecological exchanges that we had, and this one can see from the perspective of the four distinct routes through which India and Tibet used to be connected through trade and pilgrimage and culture. Of course, the first connection was the western connection, which is Kinnaur and Tibet trade route. A lot of people think that the western connection should be with Ladakh, but I'm talking in terms of the Himalaya because Ladakh purely lies in the Trans-Himalaya. Right?
Yes,
so Ladakh is a separate connection, but if one takes into account Himalaya, then there are four distinct zones through which India and Tibet used to be connected. Ladakh is the fifth one. The first western one is the Kinnaur route. The second such route was through Uttarakhand, through Johar Valley, through Bayans Valley, means through Lipu Lake Pass and through Milam Valley, that Milam Pass. So in Uttarakhand, these two were the most prominent route. There were other routes also in Uttarakhand, but these were two main routes. And then in Ladakh, we have known about the Leh and the Nari Lhasa connections. In Sikkim, the third one was in the eastern Himalaya in Sikkim through Nathula and Jalepla and in North Sikkim through 𝗏𝗏 Limala. These passes were there through which trade and the cultural connection used to be there. The fifth one has been in Arunachal through Bumla and Tawang in the western Arunachal, then in between Mechuka and Kepang, and in the middle section, and in Geling and Wolong in the towards the east of Arunachal. So these were the prominent connections through which India has been, culturally and through trade has been linked with Tibet. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, you have widely researched Himalayan borderlands. How did the traditional Indo-Tibetan trade routes shape the economic prosperity of this region?
When we say trade, we think primarily in terms of the merchandise goods only, but the trade one has to include pilgrimage also, because, and why I'm saying so, I'll come back to trade, but why I'm saying so, because we have seen in case of Himalaya, Trans-Himalaya, and even in case of Central Asia, that the pilgrimage route and the trade route has been almost overlapping. Wherever the trade route goes, pilgrimage follows the same route, or wherever the pilgrimage route has been laid, traditionally the trade also followed that route.
Okay, sir.
So, as far as the goods that were primarily exported from India, or it has been imported from Tibet side, of course, India being ecologically quite diverse, so agriculture has been the strong point of India. So India has traditionally been blessed with a lot of agriculture products, whereas Tibet has been area of climatic limitations. So because the climate limited a lot of agriculture there,
yes,
so agricultural products was one of the big draw for the Tibetans. So India used to from the Indian side, through all the routes that we talked about, India used to export barley, wheat, to some extent rice also, even pulses, jaggery, spices.
yes,
And in fact, the connections between India and Tibet, it was the north-south connection, and north-south connection can be best understood from the perspective that when the traders used to, or the often the normal regular villagers also, they used to go across, and vice versa, when people used to come from the other side,
okay, sir.
they would exchange and they would bring things, and this can also be understood from the perspective of people say, Silk Route, but silk was, the goods which was exchanging hand only among the who's who, or those who used to have bigger pockets, the rich people. But most of the population used to trade in sugar and salt.
Yes, sir.
So sugar used to go from the Indian side of the border to Tibet, and salt used to come from the Tibetan side, because Tibet have a lot of lakes,
Yes,
which are brackish water lakes, which used to traditionally produce salt. And back in the days when Himalaya was not that well connected with the rest part of India, so Himalayan used to, or the population in Himalaya was used to the salt from the Tibet.
okay, sir.
So the north-south trade was also sugar and salt trade, by and large. But beyond that, there was textile and clothing exchanges were there. So silk used to be exported from as far as from Varanasi and from Bengal to Tibet.
Okay,
The cotton cloth used to also be one of the big draw. And then there used to be shawls and the blanket. These shawls and blankets used to be made out of a lot of wool, which used to come from Tibet, and the finished product used to go from the other side, from this side. Beyond that, there was metal, and the craft woods were also there. So the iron tools used to go from Indian side. Gems and jewelry, the finished product of gems and jewelry used to go from the Indian side, but a lot of precious stones used to come from the Tibet side, and gold used to come from the Tibet side. One thing which people rarely talk about the trade with the Tibet is more so from the Sikkim side. A lot of automobiles used to a lot. I don't mean numerically a lot, but whatever Tibet used to know about the automobiles, it used to go from India in knockdown forms. People used to take that on the mule or the ponies. They used to dismantle cars and cycles, and then they used to take it to the other side, on the Tibetan side, and then they used to assemble it back. So even automobiles used to be taken to Tibet from the Indian side, which rarely gets talked about. And then, of course, Buddhist scriptures were there, statues were there. All these things used to be taken, back and forth that way. So, from the Tibetan side, particularly, the wool and the wool crafts used to come to India. The animal produce used to come from Tibetan side, like the yak tails and the animal skins. Even the condensed milk used to come from Tibetan side. More so in the eastern sector, in place like Kalimpong, it has grown big on some of the food industry has grown big on the milk products which used to come from Tibetan side. So the India and Tibet used to be quite vibrant linkages in terms of trade as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, along with trade, there was a very rich culture flow as well. What kind of culture exchange used to take place between India and Tibet through these routes?
One can, understand that the cultural exchange from two axes. One is the, religious and philosophical axis. The cultural exchange used to take place, and the other is the, mixing of the blood. When I say mixing of the blood, means people marrying, across from the Indian side of the, borders to the other side.
Okay, sir.
So these were, the two axes of exchanges. But beyond that, there were, cultural exchange-wise, there were, other medium of consumption, which is, the artifacts which were produced.
Okay.
So one can see the the religious texts. A lot of religious texts first went from India, the Hindu text, and a lot of those Hindu text has been translated into Tibetan. So these were quite a vibrant exchange between India and Tibet. So Buddhist art has been there, monastic architecture has been there, and the sculpture and the woodwork has been there as the medium of cultural exchange. Beyond that, the medicine has been one of the points of the cultural exchange, because the Tibetan medicine, which we know it as 𝗨𝗃𝗏, the 𝗨𝗃𝗏, the Tibetan medicine, is based on the Indian Ayurveda system.
Okay.
Right? So that also one can see, and of course when we say that the 𝗨𝗃𝗏 is based partly, not entirely, but partly on Ayurveda. So obviously our Charak Samhita and Susruta Samhita, where the documents the Tibetans used to hold in high esteem as far as cultural exchange is concerned. And of course Tibetans did also make use of Indian astrological system to have their calendar, which is, of course, it is not exact calendar like how the Indians have, but the Tibetan astrological practices, it has influences of Indian, Jyotish Shastra. So
Okay.
These are some of the, prominent axis of cultural exchanges that one can, think. And of course, there are borrowed vocab that emanated from Sanskrit text that has been there. So yeah, and of course, trade and trade-based cultural exchanges has always been there in terms of the spices, grain, silk, salt, and sugar that we just spoke about.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, monasteries plays a very important role in our high Himalayan societies. How monasteries in Himachal Pradesh are maintaining and promoting Indo-Tibetan culture ties?
Monastery has always very strong relation across the borders, because borders are only political, but the culture flows. People have been in contact with each other for longest period of time. Despite the 1962 punctuation, when Tibet went under the control of the Chinese, a lot of Tibetans they came to India for refuge. And when a lot of Tibetans came, not only the general Tibetans came, but Tibetans came with a lot of religious, art and artifacts, which they thought they had to safeguard, and they brought it on the Indian side. And a lot of students of the Tibetan theology, they also came. So a lot of monks, they also came to Tibet to study, religion, to study Tibetan philosophy. And our monasteries across Himachal Pradesh, not only in Kinnaur and maybe in Spiti and Lal, but also as far as Dharamsala, has been the repository of some of those art and artifacts which were brought in by the people who escaped the Chinese regime, Tibet. So our monasteries became one of the safe place to keep these religious arts and artifacts. Also, it became the knowledge center, which helped the flow of the Tibetan culture among the Tibetan diaspora. And of course, in Trans-Himalaya, our own population looks more towards the Tibetan culture through the Tibetan Buddhism. So a lot of students, a lot of monks who are there, the young monks who are there, they need Tibetan teachers who can teach Tibetan language, who can teach Tibetan philosophy.
Yes.
So we see that in our monastery, a lot of teachers are of Tibetan origin, who have been studying the religion and the Tibetan philosophy sitting in India. So that way, Tibet, the monasteries in Himachal has been repository of the linkages between India and Tibet, despite it is only about this side of the border. But our monastery has been contributing a great deal in not only safeguarding but also propagating the philosophical and the religious knowledge.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. My next question is, sir, what stories do Kinnaur's pastures communities tell about ancient Indo-Tibetan linkages?
That's area which is very less talked about, because a lot of people outside the border areas, they do not talk about the pastoral community. They talk about the time when people used to go across and come relatively freely, and how well they used to mix with each other. And then the Chinese came and everything came to almost a standstill. So the story that they talk about is along the border villages, that how a lot of Tibetans used to be very comfortable in talking, conversing with them in the Indian languages.
Okay.
How Tibetans used to come to the Indian side, and they would look to go to the Kashmir or the Simla or in Punjab or this side in the eastern Himalaya, going to Assam or going to Bengal. How Tibetans used to, they would say that Tibetans used to look forward to coming to this side, because this side they used to see that some of the bigger towns and cities used to offer them good business. So first they would come for that reason, and the other they would talk about is along the border villages. Some people used to be have relations there because they were married there, so they had their relatives. Now no longer, because it's almost about half a century. People are not able to go and have that kind of mixing. But nonetheless, earlier they used to marry across, and they used to have a very vibrant and very brotherly relation across the villages. And when they used to land up there, they used to be treated very well. And also they used to talk about along the border areas, some of the monasteries used to be there, which used to be connected with the monastery on this side. So it used to be kind of minor Buddhist circuit, that they would if they would go on pilgrimage, they would go to both the monasteries, which on the side of the border, on the other side of the borders. And the pastoral communities would also talk about some of the villages which started on the other side of the border, which started their march on prosperity, driving on the roads of the Indian side. In the sense, they would come to the Indian side of the villages and they would go towards Simla, and they would buy the seedlings of apple, and they would start planting the apple on their side of the village. And particularly this is so on the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 village in Tibet currently.
Okay.
So they say there are about 3 households. They would say that they used to have apple orchard because they bought the apple plants from the Indian side. And because on the Tibet side, the towns and cities would be very far off, so they would look towards the Indian side to whatever surplus they would generate from their villages. So because of this punctuation, because of the border became the hard border, they have not been able to do so. Of course, later they say that they have heard that connectivity has become relatively better on their side also. But they do say that the road connectivity on the Indian side came first among the border villages. On the Tibetan side, they say it came late. But they say whatever they have heard or they have known that now they are able to sell it to the cities and the towns on the other side themselves. But they do not have that frequent access to the market, or very few traders come to their side of villages, because it is still, despite the connections, despite the transport connectivity, their villages are still extremely remote for their side of the borders. So these are some of the things that they talk about. But when they talk about the connections or before how it used to be, they talk about with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of softness in their heart, and they remember some of the their acquaintances which some of the elderly, they say that they might have died by now, because it's a long story now.
Thank you so much, sir. And finally, sir, for our listeners, could you tell us something about the rich culture identity of Kinnaur that makes this region truly unique?
Well, the rich culture of Kinnaur emanates from the geography, which is the unique geography of Kinnaur. As I was saying, the unique geography is the 3 different mountain ranges, and Kinnaur in itself, it represents the entire Himalaya, because it has all the different varieties of the Himalaya that it has. So this gets reflected into the culture as well. Of course, if one sees Kinnaur there, culturally the upper and the lower Kinnaur has differences. Of course, that's enough homogeneity also, but the people in the upper Kinnaur and the lower Kinnaur, morphologically also they appear quite distinct from each other, and that's because of the geographically also Kinnaur has so much of diversity. So this culture-wise, if one looks at Kinnaur, so one can see that Kinnaur has the upper Kinnaur is out and out. It's about Tibetan Buddhism. Lower Kinnaur is about dominance of Hinduism, and then the middle Kinnaur is the it's syncretic values, where people would be having both a Hindu name and a Buddhist name.
Okay, sir.
Believe in that is there, and because Kinnaur has so much of diversity, it gets reflected in the fair and the festivals of Kinnaur, and it gets reflected in the traditional attire of the Kinnaur that Kinnaur wears. Because Kinnaur has been interacting with in all directions, north, south, east and west. So Kinnaur has also traditionally picked up all these traditions from from north, from south. When I say north, from Tibet, from south, from Simla and beyond, and from Uttarakhand and That's why. So Kinnaur, even in the traditional weaving pattern, Kinnaur picked up nuances of it and has produced its own unique style of it. So, and because there is a lot of ecological zonation in Kinnaur, traditionally the crops and the vegetation that has grown in Kinnaur,
Yes, sir.
it has also produced a wide variety of food in Kinnaur. Like, Kinnaur is the only place where 𝗎𝗔 is grown in India, right?
Yeah, sir.
Similarly, the wild apricots that has been growing in Kinnaur. So traditional, food like hunting and all, which has been there. If you ask in most part of the, Himalaya, people would not be aware of 𝗎𝗔 or the wild apricots.
Yeah, बिल्कुल.
Cultivated ones are there, but the wild apricots, a lot of people in that part of the Himalaya, they would not know. So all these things have resulted in the way Kinnaur and Kinnaurites have negotiated Himalaya and beyond in a very nuanced and a very unique fashion. So of course as I was saying, the syncretic values of the Kinnaur is something which is you don't get to see in the eastern Himalayan region that easily. Of course, some bit of it is there, but that's a very rather I would say it's a modern phenomena or the post-colonial phenomena. But Kinnaur has always known this.
Yes, sir.
So syncretic value is something that people value in the modern times more than anything else. So pilgrimage-wise, Kinnaur has been rather a bridge between the mainstream Indian landmass and Tibet. So Kinnaur, I would say, it should be viewed, it should be understood from the perspective of a bridge, which is a cultural bridge, which is a geographic bridge, which is an ecological bridge, and then of course when I say cultural bridge, it brings everything, the language, the belief system, as well as the culinary traditions of Kinnaur.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It was really nice talking to you, sir. Thank you so much. Really thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
So friends, stay tuned and stay connected with Voice of Kinnaur 88.4 FM.